Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us today for another Exclusive Networks webinar. My name is Chris Panaris, and I am the Marketing Manager here at Exclusive Networks. Today's webinar will be led by one of our awesome vendors, Bitglass. They will be talking to you today about the top CASB use cases. But before we get into that, I wanted to take a couple minutes to inform any newcomers joining us today about what Exclusive Networks offers everyone. So we are a value-added distributor for cyber and cloud security. We handle Bitglass's partner onboarding process. We offer pre-configuration and staging services, rapid turnaround on quotes, and direct access to account management and support resources like myself. And you always get to speak to a real person when you call in to Exclusive Networks or send us an email. We also offer technical marketing and sales support. We offer assistance with building qualified leads and closing deals. We offer certification training in group and individual sessions. We offer a wide range of finance and leasing services to cover a variety of IT project requirements and technologies. And we have a growing list of vendor partners chosen specifically to integrate with each other. A little more about our support and services. We offer pre- and post-sales support, security tools migration, security tools jumpstart services, staging services, vulnerability testing services, and cloud competency training. Now it's time to get to the reason why you're all here. Our speaker today, joining us from Bitglass, is Will Hushaimi. He is a product marketing manager at Bitglass. So without further ado, Will, please take it away.
All right. Like Chris mentioned, my name is Will. I'm a product marketing manager here at Bitglass. I recently got to work on our Claim for Adoption report, which was our cloud adoption report that we do every year. I'll get into what that included shortly, but before that, I'm going to present to you guys what we do here at Bitglass. So we're called a cloud access security broker. And basically what that is, it's a security tool that secures any device, any application, any network. We secure, for financial industries, for companies in health, companies in various industries, but what we do is basically secure data, and I'll get into specifically details, but this is a preview of the 4 quadrants. Essentially, these are the 4 main things that we focus on in the cloud access security broker space. So these are some achievements that Bitglass has had. We have raised $150 million in capital. We're now considered a global company. We were once called the #1 tech company to watch by the Wall Street Journal. And yeah, you can see many of the big accomplishments that we've had here at Bitglass. Moving on to the next slide. This is basically where the importance of Bitglass comes in. So the cloud adoption report that I mentioned that I did was the 2019 report, but we've actually been doing this report since 2014. In 2014, when we first did the report, we had observed that 24% of companies have adopted cloud applications. Now, this is obviously a super small number, but by 2016, it was already up to 59%. 2018, as you can see, got up to 81%. And then this last report that I did, we were at a whole 86%. The 3 industries that we like to pick on are finance, healthcare, and education. These are basically some of the industries that we think use the most cloud applications and are really need like cloud security because they have all sorts of sensitive data. I mean, in finance, you have payment card industry data, credit card information, et cetera. Healthcare, you have, medical history. Education is a mix of everything. You have, health information for the kids. You have, payment card industry data as well. You have all kinds of stuff. So these 3 industries really usually basically almost require a cloud access security broker, in order to secure that data to be compliant with different compliances you have, like HIPAA for healthcare and a few more that we'll get into soon. So yeah, as I said before, the 2019 cloud adoption rate was at a whole 86%. This is actually one of the slides from my A for Adoption report. So there's been lots of growth over the last 5 years in cloud adoption. This is an example of 2 applications. You have Office 365 and G Suite, which I'm sure most of you guys use. In 2014, G Suite kind of had a little bit of a head start because they they introduced the idea first of basically having all these applications you can use like Google Slides, Google Docs and whatnot. And it allowed employees to basically be able to collaborate. But by 2016, Office 365 obviously began to catch up, and 2019 they have a huge lead because obviously people are familiar with using Word and PowerPoint and whatnot. So once Microsoft introduced the cloud element, it took a huge jump. So now in 2019 you have a 78.8% adoption rate. So most companies are using Office 365, which means that a lot of sensitive data can be in the cloud through the Office 365 application. So the security of that is very, very important. Also, bring your own device. So this is, I'm sure most of you guys, when you're working, sometimes you check your email through your phone, a personal phone specifically. BYOD is basically just that. So companies are allowing employees to use their own devices. If you see on the right-hand side, only 15% of companies are not enabling BYOD. So most companies are allowing people to use their own phone, check their email, which could be a huge security risk if not secured properly, right? So if somebody's logging in and they have access to medical information or somebody's social security numbers through some, Excel sheet that's been, that companies have allowed their employees to access, that could be a huge security risk. So with BYOD at basically most of the companies around the world, it's very important that they enable or basically use the proper security tools to secure that data. So now we're going to go into basically kind of a little more depth into what the problem is and how Bitglass comes into play. So at first, companies had all their employees accessing data on premises. People were in the building, they had firewalls, everything was kind of secure. But as people started to, work remotely, or there was different offices and stuff like that, it became a bit of a security risk because that data was no longer protected by the firewall. It was going beyond it. So on top of those, you can see that's the unmanaged devices example on the bottom right. So for those unmanaged devices, once they're leaving the premises, you can't secure them, right? So on top of that, you had unmanaged applications. Employees were using random applications that basically were unsanctioned by the company. So, Dropbox, if they're saving files to Dropbox and the company doesn't have the right tools to secure that, that becomes a very huge security risk, right? Facebook, sometimes if they're messaging each other, there's private data. Netflix, that's an interesting example, but yeah, there's many unmanaged applications that employees are using, and if companies are not aware of it, they're not able to secure them properly. So they're in need of a security tool that can secure all unmanaged apps, unmanaged devices, as well as obviously managed apps and managed devices. So to decrease the data leakage and threat risk that you see right in between. So that's exactly what a CASB does, and we'll get into the specifics shortly. But going back to the industries, these are the compliances that a lot of these industries have to comply with. So for healthcare, you have the HIPAA, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. So basically they have to make sure that they secure all medical history and all types of healthcare information for the patients. In financial services, you have payment card industry data, the PCI DSS, which is basically, all credit card information, anything in regards to finances, credit history, whatnot. So this is any company in financial services has to comply with this, so they have to have the right security tools. Education, like I mentioned before, is a huge, very complicated one because they have all kinds of data. And then cross industry, you have CCPA, the recent California Consumer Privacy Act. This was something came out this year that companies are now having to comply with. Next, we'll go into basically the responsibility model. What app vendors are responsible for versus like the enterprise, right? So if a company is using a certain application, the application is in charge of obviously how the application works, storage of the data, service, and the network. But the security is usually kind of shared, right? So who's accessing that data, how it's being protected, the visibility of it, which devices are accessing that data. That's not really, on the app side. That's definitely on the enterprise side. So they have to make sure they have the proper tools to be able to have that visibility over the data over which devices are being used, which devices are allowed to access it, and how that data is being protected, and to secure themselves from threats and whatnot, right? So it's definitely a shared responsibility that both enterprise and app vendor have to be aware of. So it's definitely an interesting case because some companies rely very much on the app vendor and assume it's their responsibility to basically do anything in regards to security as well. But definitely it's a shared responsibility, as you can see in this slide. Moving on, we have a little more into what CASBs do, right? You have the different type of applications at the top. Major SaaS applications are like G Suite and Office 365. They're applications that companies know that employees are probably going to be using. They make sure they set themselves up with the proper security tools for that. But you also have these random applications like long tail SaaS apps. These are, apps that employees are using to, make their life easier. For example, for me as a product marketing manager, I use Canva sometimes instead of Photoshop. It's basically a website where you can design a lot easier. But if I'm, let's say, designing business cards and I'm doing it for, a C-suite, for the whole C-suite of any chief member in the company, I'm basically putting their phone number on there. Now you have the sensitive data of that person on Canva, right? So it's very important to secure long tail SaaS applications and be sure that it's not, can be hacked or got into by the wrong person. You also have internal applications where basically companies are basically making their own applications, and sometimes sensitive data is also plugged into there. And obviously that's done through a lot of the IaaS platforms out there like AWS and whatnot. So having protection for all these different type of applications is very, very important. And that's done through proxies and APIs. APIs, actually, I'm going to get into that specifically in the next slide, but having APIs protects data at rest, which is super important. And then proxies are more for protecting data in real time. And I'll get into those specifics shortly. You'll also see right at the bottom is the 4 quadrants. You have data protection, threat protection, identity, and visibility. These are Bitglass's 4 quadrants that we like to focus on. We think these are like the 4 important pieces to security in the cloud space. And then on the bottom, you see managed and unmanaged devices, right? So managed devices, as you probably already know, are corporate devices, and then unmanaged devices are, bring your own device, personal devices and whatnot. So it's very important to have security for both. So with most companies, they use MDMs, which stands for mobile device management. This is basically an agent-based tool, which means that they're plugging in something into your phone to have access to everything. Now, obviously, as an employee, you don't really want access to everything. It's not really important. It's not important for the company to see your photos and personal contacts and whatnot. So the solution for that is an agentless proxy, and that's something Bitglass provides. Basically, we can secure all the important data without needing access to everything on the phone. We could do basically a remote wipe where basically you only wipe the important data without deleting someone's personal information that that has nothing to do with the company, right? So you secure all the important stuff, and you don't invade the privacy of the employee by having access to everything. So that agentless proxy is definitely a big thing, and one of the main things we have here that a lot of corporations love, because they can keep their privacy, but also the company doesn't risk any data getting lost. So we definitely love to focus on that agentless proxy product that we have here. And then here is kind of the specifics of how each thing works. API integration is visibility and control over data at rest. An API is basically like a connector, right? A lot of companies have APIs. Another example of an API is like when you have like sign in through Facebook or sign in through Google. Those are also APIs. So this gives you protection over data at rest, but that's not enough nowadays, right? You have to see what's, if something's being downloaded or uploaded, you have to be able to read for malware or things like that. And that's where real-time data protection comes into play. And that is for proxies. Forward and reverse proxies both protect in real time. But like I mentioned before, forward proxies are agent-based, where you have to install something on every device, and that could be a huge headache for companies, right? You're always hiring somebody. Sometimes it takes a long time, And if you actually saw in our achievements, that third slide, we have a 3-week period where we could basically have everything secured with a reverse proxy method. So it only takes us 3 weeks. With a forward proxy, it can take maybe 2 weeks per employee or something like that. I'm not really sure on the timeline, but a forward proxy is tough, but we do that as well in a very good fashion. So if a company is looking for a forward proxy, we provide that. A reverse proxy is also something we can provide. So that's completely agentless and can protect against, can protect for unmanaged devices. Sorry, for sanctioned applications. So protocol-specific proxies also. You have the active sync that's specifically for mobile devices. That's also part of the tools that we provide here at Bitglass. So moving to the next slide. Securing BYOD. So for this use case, obviously, like we mentioned before, everybody's moving to the cloud and they're using their own devices. So managed versus unmanaged endpoints, these are something you guys are probably familiar with now that I've talked about it. And then agent-based and agentless solutions, that's something, again, where you have an agent plugged in, or also there's a solution without the agent. And then another interesting fact is that nearly half of employees say that they would reject MDM on their personal devices. So if the company says like, hey, you can use your device, but we need to plug this into your phone to secure the data, nearly half of employees reject that. So people really don't like company having access to personal information on the phone. So that's a very important factor knowing for BYOD and how it works today, because now, partners can provide this agentless solution. So employees of these companies can basically have their devices use them without being a risk for a security or data breach. Malware. This is this part of the second quadrant, and this is you have known versus 0-day malware. Known malware is basically malware that companies have seen before. They know how to protect against it, but people come up with new malware all the time. That's what we like to call 0-day malware. You need a solution that can protect against 0-day malware before it's too late. So that's where the behavior-based protection comes in. The second line, you can see signature versus behavior-based. Signature is, you can see the malware because, maybe you've encountered it before or whatnot, so you can read the signature. That protects against a known malware, but behavior-based malware can see that, a certain file is malicious. So just off the behavior alone, they can sense it and protect against it before it gets into the company cloud, right? So behavior-based protection is very important to protect against 0-day malware, and that's something we provide here at Bitglass. So this feature of malware defense is very, very important. So cross-app visibility, you have you're able to follow data essentially wherever it goes. Office 365, if it's being accessed from home, if it's on, if the person's on a trip, wherever that person's going, you're able to protect it. So it logs and reports everything that's being done. UEBA, which is user and entity behavior analytics, is also a part of that. And that's also all in the visibility quadrant, right? So being able to see what that person is doing normally versus, if they're maybe doing something different one time, like let's say they never download anything, they're always just viewing it, and then let's say they decide to download everything for some reason, and you can basically block that because it's abnormal behavior. So being able to analyze the user and entity behavior analytics or behavior is very important, and you're able to detect abnormal behavior and stop it before they, let's say, do something with that data, right? If they have malicious intent, let's say someone accesses someone's account and then all of a sudden they download everything, you can stop that, and because more likely than not, it's malicious intent, and you can stop it. So cross-app control, so protecting data through the cloud. This is device-centric, app-centric, regardless. You can basically protect that data with contextual access control. Contextual access control is actually one of my favorite features. This is super cool. It basically, depending on where you are or when you accessed or when you logged in, you can stop someone from logging in, right? So if I log in from, Vegas, and then all of a sudden 10 minutes later I log in from Russia, it can stop that, because there's no way I could have gone from Vegas to that random country within like 10 minutes. So depending on where and when I access it, and maybe how far in between, you can stop that access, which is super cool. I really really love this feature. Data loss prevention obviously is a super important thing, right? You have sensitive data, no matter what industry you're part of. You probably have credit card information of people, personal information, addresses, whatnot. So protecting that data is very important. So yeah, the top 4 CASB use cases, BYOD is a big thing, right? A lot of companies are having employees and allowing them to use their phone. It really helps, right? They don't need to always be in the office. It helps with productivity and whatnot. So securing BYOD is basically one of the most popular reasons people adopt CASBs. And then defending against malware, the 0-day malware that I mentioned earlier, right? All kinds of new stuff that companies are not aware of. Securing that data is very important. Securing against that malware is very important. So that's another popular CASB use case. And then cross-app visibility and cross-app control. These are vital pieces of why people use CASBs, and huge selling points for us, because with BYOD being so huge around the world today, and basically the way most companies work, it allows us to basically expand and protect data for all types of companies. So with us being one of the only agentless CASBs out there, there's a lot of opportunity. This is a use case for Northwestern University, right? Like I said, education is very complicated because you have all types of different data. For this example, Northwestern University, let's say, has over 20,000 students and 3,000 faculty members. The challenges here, we have cloud deployment met with security concerns around intellectual property, research and health data, and then unmanaged device access controls. Compliance requirements, obviously, like I said earlier, HIPAA, if you guys remember, that was the health one, and FERPA for the education compliance. So with these challenges, you need to have an agentless solution, obviously, because some faculty members could be accessing data with their personal devices or off campus grounds or whatnot. You have to distinguish between these managed and unmanaged devices, which how data is being accessed, whether it's from a managed or unmanaged device, and what to do with it, who should be allowed to access certain data from their unmanaged device or not. You have DLP policies to identify and secure the PHI. PHI stands for protected health information. So, that's if there's medical history that's in some of the, let's say medical center on campus, it's very important that that data is protected, because hackers can gain access to a bunch of data through schools if schools don't think that they're a target, right? Sometimes they could assume that only hospitals will be targets and not equip themselves with the proper security tools. But with FERPA being in place, it's obviously very important that these universities protect themselves as well. Regular scans for 0-day malware in the cloud. Talked about that earlier. So making sure that there's nothing new coming in that is malicious and can affect schools. This happens every day. Schools are huge targets for malicious, attackers that want data, right? Schools can have all kinds of data. Technical safeguards for HIPAA compliance. So HIPAA, again, medical history. It's very important that you have safeguards for that. Moving into a different use case, you have John Muir Health. This is definitely more, HIPAA compliance and health data that you want to protect. Inadequate native 0365 security. So if the company is using Office 365 a lot and they're not protecting themselves with security tools, that's a huge opportunity, right? You can go in and secure that data. And then protected health information leakage from unmanaged devices. Let's say you're a doctor, right? This is called basically when you're accessing data. Let's say you're a specialist, you're a surgeon. You work at different hospitals. If you have all that data on your phone, you have someone can basically access health data from multiple hospitals just through your phone alone. So protecting that device is very, very important. It can be a huge security breach if not protected properly. So first-gen CASBs in the past have failed to deploy that, right? So they haven't been able to protect those unmanaged devices. with our agentless solution, we are able to. So it's having multiple factor authentication and different security features that our CASB provides is very important to protect that unmanaged device. So some of the solutions we talk about here are distinguishing between the managed and unmanaged devices, limiting protected health information access from risky unmanaged assets, real-time data loss prevention, using those reverse proxies and forward proxies, prevents data leakage on download, and ready deployable to all mobile devices, managed or unmanaged. Obviously, you also want to have encryption, right? So if that data somehow does get accessed, it's very important that you have 256-bit full strength encryption to protect that data. So yeah, we just in a little bit of a review. We are zero-day security. Any app or network, we can protect basically any type of device or application. We have agentless deployment, huge plus for us. We can secure any device without plugging in an agent onto it. So that's a really big feature for us. And then real-time data protection anywhere, anytime. It's really important nowadays because you have people accessing data from all types of locations around the world. So yeah, and then global enterprise success via sustained innovation at scale. Having that, being able to protect against any device, any application, really gives us that advantage over other CASBs in the industry. So yeah, I'll give it back to Chris for the final slide.
Thanks, Will. Awesome. All right. Well, then, as always, I just wanted to mention here about these resources. Please take advantage of them. I mentioned them in the beginning, and you can check out our recorded webinars, general info about Bitglass, some CASB frequently asked questions, and of course, some use cases that we also discussed in this webinar. Also, you see here some email addresses you can contact. Please feel free to reach out to the first email there. That is for Carmen Villegas, and she manages Bitglass for us here at Exclusive Networks, so she can get you into contact with anybody. We also have our sales email there, and we also have our support email there. That concludes our webinar for the day. So thank you everybody for joining us, and we hope to see you on the next webinar hosted by Exclusive Networks. Take care, everyone. Thank you.